Harden is going to go down in history as one of the greatest chokers who ever lived.
How do you explain Harden's performance?
He choked, just like he choked with Oklahoma City off the bench as a sixth man, which really is his best role. I mean, he's too good to be kept as a sixth man. But the problem with James Harden is he's what I would call a dead-end player, which means that he's so good, he will be the primary ball handler on some team. He will be the primary offensive option on a playoff team. But he's simply not good enough as that guy to win you a championship. Not good enough. And so in a set, he's tantalizing because if he's available, of course, you're going to want to get him. But ultimately, he's a dead end. Now, when I say he choked.
James Harden didn't show up last night, to choke, to quit, to do the things that others said that he had to do or he must have done last night. You actually have to show up and be in attendance to do those things. And I don't know who the hell this guy was. I think there needs to be an investigation. Max Kellerman, he looked like he was drugged.
Max, who is most to blame for Houston's failure?
James Harden. And James, why do you make me do this? Why? I didn't want to do this. These guys write their scripts right now. They're the writers of the script. And I know Harden's the best player on the team, and he did a lot of good things, but guys, what did I say all season? Harden has to do what he was doing in the regular season in the playoffs when it mattered most.
I don't know if it's just me, but I see James Harden getting so much unnecessary slander nowadays, and it's resulted in a bunch of false narratives just being spun about him. And I truly believe that if somebody doesn't step up and expose some of these straight up lies being told about James Harden, that they will affect his legacy when he retires. And it will definitely hold him back in all-time discussions too. So without further ado, let's expose the lies being told about James Harden. The first lie that I hear being told about James Harden a lot is that he's inefficient. Now, before I get into detail, here's my theory on why I think people believe this. I think a majority of the reason why people believe this is because of James Harden's shot selection. During his time in Houston, and especially during his best years, he relied heavily on moves like the step back threes, the side step threes. Basically any contested shot that he took made up a majority of his shot selection, and because of that, his field goal percentage took a huge hit. If you look at James Harden's career field goal percentage, it's 44.2%, and nowadays, because of people's hyperfixation on field goal percentage and efficiency, a lot of people are going to look at that and say Harden's inefficient. But what people fail to realize is during James Harden's span in the league average field goal percentage was 45.7%, which is not that far off of where James Harden is. And the same applies from the regular season to the playoffs. In the playoffs, for his career, Harden shoots 42.6%. Compare that to the league average is 44.9%. Again, not that far off. And don't get me wrong, James Harden is not the only player, or he's not the first player to ever deal with some type of narrative like this. This was a huge talking point around Kobe Bryant, especially around his prime, where people would love to say that he was inefficient just because his shot selection wasn't that great. But much like Kobe, Harden's true shooting percentage proves that he's efficient. For his whole career, Harden shoots 61% true shooting, and that is including his Oklahoma City days, that's including his early years in Houston. And if you were to take all of that out, if you were to just look at the prime seasons of James Harden, which to me is 2017 through about 2020, there is no drastic change. His true shooting actually goes up by 1 and sits at 62% true shooting. And if you were to compare that to every single shooting guard who was near the top of the league around James Harden's prime, you would see that Harden is more efficient than all of those players. Jimmy Butler, 58% true shooting. Klay Thompson, 59%. Donovan Mitchell, 56%. Devin Booker, 57%. None of these guys are touching 60%. And even if you take out the restriction of looking at positions, if you just look at straight up who's the best players around that time, Harden is in the same ballpark as LeBron, KD, Giannis, Luka, and Steph Curry. The fact that Harden even got the inefficient label is ridiculous, because none of the guys who are playing the same position as him, except for like Jimmy Butler, were the first option on their teams. The fact that Klay Thompson, who is regarded as one of the most efficient players in the league, has a worse true shooting percentage despite playing with the greatest amount of spacing and just flat out playing on a super team for 3 straight years, while also being relegated to a spot up role. If anything, I would argue that James Harden is a lot more efficient than people give him credit for, especially given his role and his shot selection. The fact that he's even able to crack 60% true shooting is impressive to me. The second lie I want to talk about is the notion that James Harden's a bad defender. Despite Harden having a noticeable improvement on the defensive side of the ball, people are still pushing this narrative, and it's really showing who actually paid attention to Harden's defense over the years and who's just reading tweets on the internet or just watching First Take. Like, nobody's actually paying attention, and even the stat nerds are still pushing this narrative, despite Harden's stats still showing his improvement defensively. For his whole career, Harden's defensive rating is 107. The league average defensive rating for that entire span of his career is 108. And even if you want to look at his defensive rating by season, his defensive rating is either slightly above league average or sometimes slightly below league average, and it correlates to how much the league has changed, especially due to the three-pointer. But all these numbers prove is that James Harden is just playing average on defense. Nothing more, nothing less. But you want to know my theory on why I think people believe this still? I think people still believe this because there's times where James Harden just shows flat out no effort on that side of the ball.
Number one, James Harden.
Yeah,
Looking like someone unplugged his controller. Watch this play.
Look, pick it up.
Oh my goodness. That's funny. Hey, Kenny, and if that train come off the track, pick it up, pick it up, pick it up.
He has one of those every 2 years. Like one every 2 years.
Come on, Jay.
Then like once every 2 years.
Number 5, James Harden's defense. Sit back and watch this glorious montage.
Oh my God, James. Come on, James. You better than that. Oh my goodness. Come on, man. Nah, he's back on D. He's just gonna stop him. Oh my goodness, James.
Olay.
Knock it off. Knock it off. Knock it off. Come on. No, it can't be more.
Otto Porter.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's your fault. Raise your hand. Oh man. Where is he? Oh my gosh. Are you kidding me?
And then obviously you have your infamous Shaq and the Fool clips where he's literally not even trying, he's just standing there. And it's an example of people just hearing a narrative or people just seeing one thing and then just running with it. And I think because Harden's effort was broadcasted on such a national scale as Shaq and the Fool, those clips alone kind of just told this story that, yeah, James Harden's not a good defender. But if you actually watch Harden play defense and not just look at clips or things people say on Twitter, you'll see that Harden is actually a pretty decent defender and he's pretty good when it comes to using his IQ to his advantage. Also, Harden is very physically gifted on that side of the ball with his strength and quickness, which allows him to hold his own against mismatches, especially in the post. People don't give him enough credit for that either. And he's pretty good at playing passing lanes. Am I saying Harden's a great defender? No. Am I saying he's Defensive Player of the Year caliber? Absolutely not. All I'm saying is when you actually pay attention to him on defense, when he's actually trying, he does a pretty good job staying in front of his man and using his instincts. The idea that Harden is just an atrocious net negative on defense is just absolutely false. And if anything, James Harden at his absolute best actually has the potential to be a pretty good defender if he tried, and if you put him in a position where he doesn't have to carry the offense. This next lie is the most infamous one that I keep hearing about him, but it's the notion that James Harden is a playoff choker. But yeah, man, this is going to be a long one, so buckle up. So if you look at James Harden's career playoff averages, he averages 23, 6, and 5 on 43, 34, 87 splits. Now, on the surface, 23 points per game, 6 rebounds, 5 assists isn't something to be like going crazy about, right? Some people might argue that for a player of James Harden's caliber, that's bad in the playoffs. But if you look deeper into the numbers, you would understand why this narrative is untrue. First of all, the notion that Harden's numbers drop off drastically in the playoffs compared to the regular season is just factually incorrect. If you look at Harden's numbers from 2017 through 2020, which I established as what I think his prime is, he averages 32, 9, and 7 in the regular season on 44, 36, 86 splits, and those numbers drop down to 29, 7, and 6 in the playoffs on 43, 32, 86 splits. When you think of a drastic drop off in the playoffs, you would think more than just 3 points per game, right? But 29, 7, and 6 is still really good for a player of James Harden's caliber. And again, look at some of these other guys who are regarded as better playoff performers. They all play the same position as Harden, and only one of them puts up numbers remotely close to what Harden does, and that's Donovan Mitchell. And I even expanded the list to some of the best players in the NBA. Harden is still in that same ballpark with these guys. So you're telling me in the playoffs, Harden is putting up better numbers than everyone at his position, and he's putting up similar numbers, if not better, than some of the guys who are considered the best in the league. But yet he's still a playoff choker, right? And from what I'm told, a playoff choker's numbers are supposed to take a significant hit in the playoffs. But as mentioned before, his numbers only drop off 3 points per game from the regular season, and his efficiency doesn't drop off that much either. But even if you don't want to look at numbers, if you want to just look at how he plays when it matters the most, in elimination games, Harden averages 25, 5, and 6 on 53% true shooting. Now, I know y'all are going to look at his efficiency and automatically jump and say, oh, well, you know, his efficiency isn't that good in elimination games, so that must prove that he chokes in them, right? But the thing is, that should be expected in most big games, especially elimination games like Game 7s or when the series is on the line. You shouldn't expect a guy like James Harden, especially with his shot selection, to have some amazing shooting night. But even when his efficiency isn't that great, he still produces enough to put his team in a position to win the game, despite his record in elimination games being 1-4. 4 out of those 5 games were close, and the Rockets had a chance to win those games. The only time where James Harden had an inexcusable choke job was 2017 against the Spurs. That was a home game. He only scored 10 points, and the Spurs were missing Kawhi Leonard. That's the only time where I could say, yeah, James Harden choked that game. But my question is, why are people getting on him for the 2018 series against Golden State? In that series, Harden averaged 29, 6, and 6. And in that Game 7, his team shot 7 of 44 from the three-point line, infamously missing 27 straight. Meanwhile, they shot 29 of 46 on two-pointers and shots at the basket. And Harden had 32, 6, and 6 in that game, along with 4 steals. Now, yes, Harden didn't shoot that great in that game either, but A, he still produced enough to put the team in a position to win. And B, none of his shooters showed up at all. Trevor Ariza, 0 points, 0 for 12 from the field, 0 for 9 from 3. Eric Gordon, who was the only perimeter player on that team who semi-showed up, even then he still had 23 points on 9 of 22 shooting, 2 of 12 from 3. One of the big reasons why the Rockets were so successful was guys like James Harden, guys like Eric Gordon, Trevor Ariza, Ryan Anderson, guys off the bench like Gerald Green, those valuable bench pieces who could shoot the lights out, who could score well, and who could play defense. And the craziest thing was, in the first half, the Rockets shot 6 of 23 from the three-point line, and they were still up by 11. Instead of deciding to shoot 27 straight threes, why didn't they just continue to keep attacking the basket and getting easy opportunities at the rim? Why not just keep doing that instead? Because the decision to not adjust and continue to shoot threes was what cost them this game, and it cost them a championship. So if you want to blame anybody for that Game 7 2018, blame the coaching, blame Mike D'Antoni. And then people try and say the same thing about Harden in 2019. In that series, he averaged 35, 7, and 5 on 59% true shooting. Like, at this point, this narrative doesn't even make sense anymore. Throughout Harden's entire career, he's played the Warriors 4 times in the playoffs. Yes, he's never beaten them, but he still averaged 36 and 6 on 57% true shooting. The fact that he's putting up these numbers and people still try and call him a playoff choker is insane. And if you were to only look at his numbers against the Super Team Warriors, his numbers don't even drop. His numbers are still 31, 6, and 6 on 56% true shooting. And the sad truth that a lot of people don't want to accept, during those 3 years of the KD Warriors dominating, James Harden was the only player to push them to 7 games. And most likely he would have beaten them if his team didn't get hit with the worst kind of luck. Even if you want to look at post-Houston James Harden in the playoffs, with Brooklyn he averaged 21, 9, and 6 on 67% true shooting, which is a career high. And if we're being realistic, that was probably his best opportunity to win a championship outside of 2018. But again, he just got hit with the worst kind of luck, just getting injured in the middle of that Bucks series. And last year's playoffs wasn't really that great for him. He averaged 19, 9, and 6 on 58% true shooting. And on the surface, those numbers don't look terrible, but it's the fact that he didn't show up when his team needed him, when Joel Embiid went down, and the fact that he only had 11 points in that elimination game against the Heat, and he only took 9 shots. So I guess you could say that 2022 was a bad playoff run for Harden, but outside of that, he's never had a terrible playoff run. He's never had a stretch in the playoffs where he's just playing so bad to the point where he chokes. That's never happened in his career. Outside of the 2022 playoffs, if you look at all of his numbers, they prove that he is undoubtedly not a playoff choker. And they prove that he's actually pretty good in the playoffs. So this narrative that he's not just needs to die off. It just needs to stop. A lot of these lies are getting pushed by a lot of the big NBA creators on YouTube, for analysts on TV, and even worse, people on social media. Nowadays, a lot of people don't like looking into context. Instead, they just like to run off with narratives and just regurgitate the same things that they hear from other sources. And unfortunately, James Harden has been a victim of that for the past like 5 years. So in this video, I just kind of wanted to clear up some of those lies using context and actually doing my research. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe. And that'll do it for this one. More videos coming soon, and peace.